Can we start now?
Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Hi, everybody. So I'm Morgan, and I'm going to start with a story. So in 2012, the Professional Laboratory and Research Services Incorporated was shut down due to a horrifying report following a PETA investigation. Workers were recorded as they kicked through and dragged dogs across the lab. Libby, as she would soon be named, was one of the nearly 250 dogs and cats found. Known only by the number tattooed on her ears, she was sick with hookworms, tapeworms, and a vaginal infection. Due to the acts of volunteer veterinarians, she was nursed back to health. Even though this laboratory is not the norm, animals are put in Libby's condition every day. The definition of animal testing by biologyonline.org is the use of animals in experiments and developmental projects, usually to determine toxicity, dosing, and efficiency of drug testing. So my main claim, my major claim that this speech supports is that animal experimentation for scientific use is unnecessary. My main supporting points are using animals for research is scientifically obsolete, animal use for scientific research is inhumane and demeaning to the animal being tested on, and testing alternatives that can lesser, if not eliminate, the use of animals for research. So my first claim, animal studies do not reliably predict human outcomes. Jill Langley wrote in the European Journal of Nuclear Medicine and Molecular Imaging, relying on animal surrogates of human illnesses is a flawed approach in science. Fewer than 50% of animal studies have predicted human outcomes sufficiently, which means over half of these tests are a waste of an animal life and a waste of time and money. In the same study, they revealed that the vaccination development against AIDS, the prediction failure of chimpanzee models was 100%. So every chimpanzee injected with AIDS died. Reliance on animal experimentation can delay the discovery and cost more human lives. The anti-arthritis drug Oprin was released by Eli Lilly in 1980. According to the results of the animal tests, Oprin was both safe and effective in modifying the disease process of arthritis. The results in human patients were quite different, though. Although Oprin was effective in treating laboratory rats with artificial arthritis, it did not reverse the disease process. And it was a much different outcome in humans. It proved to be highly toxic and ended up killing 61 people. Which brings me to my second claim. Animal use for scientific research is inhumane and demeaning to the animals being tested on. Levels of pain are often not brought into consideration depending on the species. The book Animal Pain, a practice-oriented approach to an effective pain control in animals, states, different animal species exhibit their behavioral patterns and specifically those induced by pain in distinctly different ways. Mice represent nearly 80 to 90% of research animals used in biomedical research. So scientists are holding other species to the same standard as a mouse would. According to the book Pathology of Laboratory Rodents and Rabbits, written by Dr. Dean Percy, the laboratory mouse has several unique characteristics, and there are vast differences than the normal anatomy due to homozygosity and recessive or mutant traits that are seen in bred mice, which are laboratory mice. So essentially, it means that scientists are holding these mice to an old standard instead of growing and developing these new tests for them. Excuse me. So, which brings me to my third claim. Scientists should use alternate subjects to test on when doing these tests. There are alternatives to research besides testing on living non-human animals. Cells, tissues, and organs can be kept alive outside a living organism and used for testing. So that means that they can take just a little bit of cells from an animal and work on those cells instead of working on the entire animal. So they can save many lives and shortening the recovery process, making it a much easier transition for these animals. There are a variety of non-animal organisms that can replace some animals in testing, such as plant cells, single-celled organism, and invertebrates. They do not experience pain or suffering in the same way that animals do. So in conclusion, my main claim is that animal testing is flawed and unnecessary, which I prove through these supporting points of using animals for research is scientifically incorrect. Animal use for scientific research is inhumane and demeaning to the animals being tested on. And I suggested some testing alternatives that can lesser, if not eliminate, the use of animals for research. Lastly, I would just like to end with a definition. This is the definition for animal cruelty: the human infliction of suffering or harm upon non-human animals for purposes other than self-defense or survival. Therefore, animal experimentation by definition for scientific use is animal cruelty. This is not only not fair to the animals, but the lives lost by the humans. Thank you.
All right, Morgan, the structure in the introduction is all great. The proposition's very clear. There's an excellent layout of the secondary points. The opening story gives us a little bit of controversy, so we know why we're arguing about this particular thing. Although I do think it's a little odd when you acknowledge that the lab that's being described in that opening section is not typical, and then you go ahead and generalize from it anyway. That's going to be a little bit problematic. The secondary points that you presented, the first one is fine. The second one is clearly a claim of value, and the third one, although there are claims of fact that support it, it's phrased as a claim of policy, so you want to be a little bit more consistent on those sorts of things. Everything on the second point, I think, is problematic because it is so value-based, although there is some information there where you're trying to argue that since it doesn't produce a result or an effective result, that makes it sort of cruel and wasteful. The part that just talks about it not producing a result, that I think has application to the other arguments. You had one example of medication that was approved and turned out to be dangerous, but there's no discussion of what the human testing is that's required before these medicines are put on the market, because there's not, it's not like they test it on mice and then they say, okay, it works, and they give it to human beings. That's not how it works. So you have to have a little bit more explanation of what the problem is going from the one step to the last step. I thought you did a good job citing most of your evidence and presenting justifications for your position. I thought the presentation was also very solid. You look at the audience and you're not overly dependent on the script. All right.